What's up guys, how you doing? It's been a minute since my last video. I have been playing Shadow of the Erdtree religiously. I have 5 different builds. I have played through it 4 times in whole, and I'm close to the end of my 5th playthrough of the DLC. I was a little rusty coming back because I've just been playing Baldur's Gate 3 for a very long time until the release of Shadow of the Erdtree, so my Souls-like muscle reflexes were off, but I think I'm getting a little bit better. I've not jumped back into PvP yet. It looks promising with this latest patch. They got some of the bugs out. There's no more chainsaw glitch, and we have some balancing on some of the more OP weapons. It's a mixed bag, but I'll get into it with patch 1.13. So initially for the PvP exclusive balances, the first thing is that they've increased poise damage for almost all of the DLC weapons: the light greatsword, backhand blades, hand-to-hand arts, and beast claws. The only thing truly holding back the light greatswords from being meta is their lack of poise damage, and now they will break poise in 1. So that's a good thing for light greatswords. They're actually now viable where they weren't before, but backhand blades are overtuned pretty much because they already deal a ton of damage, and all of the Ashes of War for the backhand blades are overtuned, which they did make some adjustments to, but having the poise damage added to the backhand blades are going to make them so much more OP. I know in a previous patch they had actually nerfed the poise damage of some of the dual wield attacks for the weapons that are listed on here, like the straight sword and katanas, but now they have increased the poise damage of the dual wield attacks for those, as well as thrusting swords, curved swords, spears, whips, fists, and claws. And they fixed the whole ability to do the backsteps spam, because they decreased the backstep invulnerability window when you use the Fine Crucible Feather Talisman or the Talisman of all Crucibles. I saw where that was becoming cancerous as well, especially the backstep and bow. As far as the skills, the first one up is Savage Lion's Claw. The second hit of the follow-up attack is now easier to land, but in PvP, pretty much that's going to be rolled. But I'm confused a little bit by the language here. This decreased damage animation of the first attack against other players. I don't know if that means they decrease the damage of the first attack. The initial attack would be the one that you would land, if any. I don't know if it's decreased the damage, because if that's the case, Savage Lion's Claw is not going to be viable. But if it just means it decreased like the time, the length of the animation, then that, is promising. But I'm just confused by the language. I don't know if it's a translation error or if that's just the intended verbiage. They have decreased the invulnerability window of Raging Beast against other players. I'm not sure I've seen where Raging Beast was cancerous at all. I'm not sure whether this is a good one or not. But the next one, Blind Spot, has a decreased invulnerability window against players' attacks, which is great because Blind Spot is a cancer out there. But with the backhand blades getting a buff to their poise damage, they're still coming out on top in this patch. Now, I don't like this next one. The Palm Blast has decreased poise amount generated when charging this skill. You can roll away from this skill easily. I've been invaded, and I've invaded other people and dealt with the Palm Blast, and the amount of charge up time, you will not get hit by it. So I don't believe that, the only thing that gives this skill any sort of viability in PvP is the increased poise during the charge up. So I don't believe this was a good call. Since I've not really gotten into the arena, I've just done invasions. I've not seen Miriam's Vanishing used a lot. They've decreased the invulnerability window, but I think that's what makes this spell viable. So I don't really believe they should have decreased the invulnerability window for that specific skill, especially since it's not a damage output skill. Teleportation skills, dashing skills, I don't think they should touch, especially since they've, nerfed the um, Bloodhound step, so it consumes more stamina. That was the only thing that was cancerous before, but I don't see where Miriam's Vanishing needed to be fixed in any way. With the Knight's Lightning Spear, they increased the attack power of the initial Lightning Spear, and they had decreased the attack power of the spears that are launched after the first one. And they also decreased the poise damage of all the spears. That was not the nerf that was needed. I think it's the tracking that is problematic with this specific spell, especially with those follow-up spears. So it's still going to be poison, but at least you're not going to be taking as much damage and poise damage. But the tracking was the problem there. But there will be unlisted fixes and patches. They don't always put down everything that they do within these patches, so it's yet to be seen what the tracking will look like. I'm sure somebody out there is testing it already. As far as the general balance adjustments heading, as far as weapons, the only adjustment is an increased damage animation for the light greatsword charge attack, and that's in PvE only. And the rest deal with your summons, both NPC summons and Spirit Ash summons. They've increased the stats and statuses, and they've increased the attack power and damage negation of summoned spirits, excluding the Mimic tier when Revered Ash Blessing is at 5, and also when you're at +8 or higher. The inclusion of this adjustment might be because of some people griping about the difficulty of the DLC, and I think those people would be more likely to be using the Spirit Ashes, so tuning the Spirit Ashes some will make the game a little bit easier for them. This could be the way of them generally balancing the DLC that won't exclude anybody that actually enjoys the challenge. And then we come to the armaments. They've increased the attack power scaling and upgrading of the following armaments: repeating crossbow, spread crossbow, and rabbit's cannon. Now, with the spread crossbow, they've also nerfed the status effect arrows, or bolts rather, so you don't need to worry about the increased attack power. I think the increased attack power keeps it viable, even though they're going to be nerfing the status effect, because people are using this solely for the status effect buildup instead of the damage. But let's be real, people are still going to be using it solely for the status effect buildup. The next armament listed is the Euphoria. It's Euphoria without the H. Weird name. But they've increased the holy damage when the weapon is in its luster form, decreased the number of attacks required to restore the weapon's luster, and they've increased the duration of the luster restoration effect. The Golden Lion Shield has its guard strength increased, and the Golem Fist added a damage hitbox to the hand portion of the ranged fist attack. Now, this weapon sucked completely before, so now it might be viable. We'll see. Somebody's going to be testing it for sure. The Smith Script Great Hammer has increased poise damage to the swing portion of the throwing attacks, yet the throwing attack itself remains unchanged. And as we addressed before with the spread crossbow, they decrease the generated status buildup when you use bolts that have status effects. And the first talisman that's listed under the armaments, that's the Ailment Talisman. After the onset of a status ailment, the status buildup or duration of the status ailment will now also be reduced immediately by a certain amount. So when the talisman kicks in, you're also going to see that bar reduce instead of just the effect of the talisman. And all three of the clarifying horn charms have an increased focus resistance. So these talismans will probably be more important when you come across a sleep or madness build. And this might clarify some of what I read before about the Savage Lion's Claw. They increase the attack power and poise damage of the first attack. So maybe that statement about the increased animation is also covering this. I was really just confused by the verbiage there. Swift Slash, they reduce the movement distance when you use the skill, and they extended the recovery time. So that's how they're trying to balance that cancerous Ash of War. Overhead Stance, they increase the attack power against enemies other than players. Aspects of the Crucible Wings had its attack power increased, and you have more directional control, and there is more poise generated when using the skill. Lightspeed Slash, that's one of Radahn's greatswords boss weapons, remembrance weapons. The additional light attacks are now affected by the attack power and ability scaling of the weapon. Rancor Slash, they increase the attack power of the Vengeful Spirits that come out after the initial Sword Dance like attack that it has, and it increases the stamina damage against guarding enemies. So you can break guards with it, kind of like Sword Dance, but with more poise damage. Revenger's Blade, they increase the directional control of the follow-up attacks after the strong attack. Horn Calling, they increase the attack power against enemies other than players. Horn Calling Storm, they increase the attack power against enemies other than players. So these are PvE exclusive changes here. Weed Cutter had an increase to the speed of the attacks. That's crazy because you get hella hyper armor on that, and now they're coming out faster, so I can see how that might be problematic in the future. Romina's Purification, which is Romina's halberd's skill, there's an increased poise value when using the skill. That skill's just crap though. Red Bear Hunt, they increase the attack power and the poise value. I've not really used that one at all. Rancor Shot, they decrease the status buildup generated when using the arrows. Yet again, that's another skill where the tracking is what's problematic, but yet they're nerfing some other aspect of it. So we'll see if they do anything about the tracking. Again, somebody else is going to be testing that. I'm not using any mods that allow me to test these things. Repeating Fire, they adjusted the attack power to compensate for the increase in the weapon damage. I'm not sure what that means. And here's Feeble Lord's Frenzied Flame. They reduced the frenzy status effect build-up against enemies. And Revenge of the Night, that's the Night Shield. Its special effect, they increase the poise damage and attack power when you use the skill immediately after guarding against an enemy attack. Well, I should say Shield of Night. The next heading in these patch notes are the spells. Admittedly, I've not gotten into the spells as much. I've played through once as an intelligence build, but I prefer dexterity and strength builds, melee builds in particular. So this is a little bit out of my ballpark, but let's go over it. The Glintblade Trio has had its attack power increased. Blades of Stone, I believe that falls from a gravity beast when you get to one of the Finger Ruins. They adjusted the attack power of the first, second, and third charge attacks. They increased the attack power of the non-charged attack, increased the attack power of the first hit of the charged attack, and reduced the attack power of the second and third, and increased the attack range and attack speed. So it's gotten an all-around buff. The Glintstone Nail, they increased the attack power and improved the tracking. Glintstone Nails, which is the multiple shot version of it, they increased the attack power and improved the tracking as well. Now, Impenetrable Thorns got a little bit of buff, a little bit of a nerf. All the impenetrable thorns will now track enemies, so every single one of those threads of thorns is going to have better tracking, but there's a decrease to the attack power and poise damage, and a decrease to the status buildup of hemorrhage and the stamina damage. And Ring of Spectral Light, they increased the attack power and the frostbite buildup. That was kind of a weak spell, so maybe now it will be more viable. And the Vortex of Putrescence, they increased the attack power and frostbite status buildup. I have not played with that one. I believe that's a remembrance spell, and like I said, I don't really play with spellcasters that often. The Incantations, the minor Erdtree, they've increased the HP recovery amount, but I don't believe they've changed the animation on it to make it look like the actual tree that Melina creates. Um, and I still don't believe it increases HP by too much. I've yet to test it myself, but we'll see. The Land of Shadow, they improved the enemy tracking. Spira, they increased the speed of. Watchful Spirit, they improved the enemy tracking. And the Divine Beast Tornado, they increased the attack power. Enemies hit by the tornado will now be launched upwards. That'll be fun. And the tornado is less likely to disappear due to collision with the terrain. Rain of Fire, which is just crap. They increase the attack power and reduce the interval between each hit. It doesn't say here that they improved anything with the tracking, which is also a problem with that spell. I'll be surprised if it's viable at all. Roar of Regalia, they increase the poise damage and attack power. Furious Blade of Ansbach, that's something I've yet to use. They increased the attack power. And Rotten Butterflies, which I've used and it's crap. It doesn't have enough of a status build-up, and they fixed that. They increased the Scarlet Rot status buildup, and they reduced the interval between the damage ticks, and also increased the attack range. So that may be viable now. I don't know if it's going to be replacing Scarlet Aeonia anytime soon, but we'll have to test that out and see how that works. Now, the next heading is Ashes, the Spirit Ashes, and essentially every single Spirit Ash has been buffed, and every single one, regardless of whatever buffs they have the note will no longer stagger as easily. So every single one of them will not be staggered as easily. Now, some of these spirits have increased HP, attack power, and some of them have more status effect build up. I'm not going to read through the entirety of the list, but it is a huge list. It is essentially every single one of the Spirit Ashes. Now, the next heading is bug fixes. A lot of these I've not experienced myself, but there are a few notable ones, and the top one is probably the best one as far as PvE is concerned. They changed the default selection of the OK cancel prompt that shows up when using the Spectral Steed whistle. While the Spectral Steed is dead, the default selection position is now OK. So when you have to use a flask to resummon Torrent, you can do it more easily instead of having to fight with the menu to go between OK and cancel. They also fixed the glitch where you could use great arrows on a regular bow by switching in the middle of a jump animation. Along with that, they have also fixed the chainsaw glitch, so you can no longer do the stance. I believe you can't open the menu when you're in a stance anymore. The Twin Blade Talisman will now work for the perfume bottles. It was not working previously. And with the summons that are inside the boss fog, they made it so that you can just summon them with a single action. And they've also adjusted the placement of a few of them. Miquella's Circlet was not really buffling Miquella's Light spell, so now that has been fixed. And that's pretty much it for most of the big bug fixes. The bug where the physical attack attribute of Scattershot throw skill of Claws and Night Weapon was different than expected, so hopefully that means Scattershot's not going to be one shot anymore. But essentially that is it for this patch. Everything else that's left other than the bug fixes I did not read out. Everything else is system specific fixes to PS5, Xbox, and PC individually. But I think I talked about the most notable things on this patch. It'll be cool to see what comes out of it and what people test using mods that allow them to see hitboxes and the actual attack powers. But you guys have a great day. Please like and subscribe, and peace.